Hello, back again for chapter 14. I can't believe we're on chapter 14 already. Jungle trekking. As we come out of the cave, my eyes blink against the bright sunshine. After the gloom of the cave, the daylight feels particularly strong. I turn to look at Sidoni, not really sure what to say or how to comment on what I just saw. I place my hand in my pocket to check if the ring is still there, wondering if I'm in some kind of a dream. Sure enough, the hard corners of the angular stone in its ornate gold setting press into my fingers as I curl them around it. The ring still feels unnaturally warm, and I marvel once again at the mysterious encounter with Mama Patley. Sidoni smiles knowingly at me, reading my thoughts in that special way that she has. She liked you, she says softly. I could tell. I smile back at her. The calmness I felt inside the cave is beginning to fade now as I look around us at the dense jungle and the narrow stone path along which we stumble forward. We do not seem to be going back in the direction we came, which means we're not heading back to the battered old truck and its strange driver and long-horned passenger. Part of me is quite relieved to realise that I will not be forced to share another journey at the mercy of Hassan the Horrible's reckless driving whilst inches away from an angry-looking Nigel. The other part of me is more than a little concerned about the fact that we seem to be walking further into the middle of the wilderness, up a still smoking volcano. Where are we going? I asked nervously, not entirely sure that I want to hear the answer. To find the Nuevo Vido gang, of course, answered Sidoni, as if this was the easiest thing in the world. Now, I've not forgotten about the Nuevo Vida gang and about how they've kidnapped Queen Atatotzli, or about how that has led to my Gran being mistaken for the new queen of the Quetzali tribe in her place. Nor have I forgotten about the strange truth serum that we've just collected from Mama Patley in a cave halfway up a Volcan de Fuego. What I had started to forget was how dangerous this all suddenly sounds. I mean, trying to trick a ruthless and dangerous gang into telling us the whereabouts of a queen who possesses immense magical powers, it's not going to be easy by anybody's standards. And I don't even want to think about what will happen if we get captured or found out by this power-hungry bunch of crooks. Then again, leaving my Gran to the mercy of a tribe who believe an old lady could be their new queen doesn't sound like much of an option either. Don't worry, Sidoni interrupts my thoughts. We will find her. I smile weakly at her. It seems she's not as worried as I am, but still doesn't make me feel much better. This is the most difficult part of our journey, Sidoni says. We have a long way to go, and the jungle is dense. I puff as I follow on behind her. The narrow, stony path seems to be getting less and less obvious now, and it's not long before we're forced to push our way through thick green plants and clamber over twisted tree roots. The heat of the afternoon is making me hot and tired, and my legs are beginning to ache. We walk and walk for what seems like ages. Strange noises are everywhere, birds squawking, insects chirping, and the sound of footsteps are all around me. Many times I jump, afraid of what is hidden deep within the jungle. The side of the mountain is becoming steep in parts, and at times I'm forced to put one hand out to the side of me to stop myself from falling. I'm at such an angle that in places I can touch the ground with my left hand while my right hand side remains above ground level. Sidoni strides on, stopping only occasionally to look around at me to check that I'm still there, I guess. Suddenly I begin to feel drops of rain, large, wet, warm raindrops that splash intermittently on my head, running down my forehead. I stick out my tongue, trying to catch some of the fresh rainwater to quench my parched mouth. The raindrops begin to fall thicker and faster until the water cascades down in a torrent, soaking me through to the skin. I don't think I've ever been so glad to feel the rain on my skin. The cooling sensation as the rainwater pours down onto me feels like heaven. My sweltering body begins to cool, and for a while I feel such relief. The torrent soon turns into a river cascading down the mountainside, making the ground slippery and muddy. The first relief that I felt at the cool raindrops soon turns to panic as I struggle to hang on to the vines and tree roots to stop myself from sliding down the mountainside. The rain shows no sign of easing, pouring and pouring down, relentlessly soaking everything in its path. Suddenly, a great flash of lightning forks across the sky, lighting up the now grey clouds. I jump as a crack of thunder explodes like a bullet from a gun. I've always been a bit scared of thunder and lightning, and now I am terrified. I've never heard thunder so loud or felt it so close to me. My bones tremble with each explosion. Suddenly, the ground seems to slide away beneath my feet, and I begin to slip down the mountainside. I grab hold of a branch hanging on desperately, ignoring the prickly leaves digging into my hands. Sidoni skids over towards me, grabbing hold of my wrist and pulling me up to my feet and dragging me into the hollow of a gnarled old tree. We rest there a while, sheltering from the storm. Where once I was deliciously cool, I am now shivering as my soaking wet clothes cling to my body. I close my eyes and think of my mum and dad back home, thinking I would rather suffer the geeky book club at the library than this. Eventually the rain starts to ease, and then, as if by magic, the rainfall stops almost as quickly as it started. The clouds part and bright sunshine streams down through the canopy of the jungle foliage, drying up the streams of water that run away through the undergrowth and down the steep mountainside. We peer out nervously at each other from our hiding place in the old tree and smile with relief. The weather here can change in a second, says Sidoni quietly. You don't say, I laugh, more than a little relieved to have survived my first tropical storm. We make our way cautiously back along our original route. I've no idea how Sidoni seems to know the way to go, but I've no idea about a lot of things lately. Our journey becomes slower and more treacherous than before, if that's at all possible, because now we have to contend with the fact that the ground is a muddy, slippery mess. I take each step cautiously, not wishing to repeat my earlier drama of tumbling down a mountain. Just when I think we will never reach our destination, wherever that may be, Sidoni turns to me and places a finger to her lips. She crouches low down to the ground and I follow her lead. The light is beginning to fade and dusk is upon us. Sidoni moves slowly now, like a cat creeping through the undergrowth. We make our way carefully and without a sound, moving from plant to plant, tree to tree, keeping ourselves hidden from view. At first I am puzzled, but then I can hear the faint chatter of voices. I can hear drums banging and what sounds like singing or chanting. Sidoni reaches a large plant that has huge leaves and looks a bit like the kind of plant you might see in Jurassic Park. I'm half expecting a brontosaurus to peep its head out at me, ready to take a munch on the juicy green leaves. I almost chuckle out loud at how much my imagination is beginning to run away with me, but then this has hardly been an ordinary kind of a day. We crouch down behind the cover of the plant and peer through its leaves. From our hiding place, I can just make out what looks like a kind of bonfire burning brightly in a clearing. The clearing is quite away from our hiding place, and it's difficult to see exactly what's going on. There seems to be people dancing all around the fire, and there's laughing and chanting. I can't make out the faces of the people, but they appear to be dressed in a kind of tribal clothing, with elaborate headdresses and capes flowing out behind their bodies as they dance and weave their way around the fire. The drums beat louder and faster, and the chanting turns to whooping and calling. A procession of people emerges from somewhere in the distance beyond the fire. The procession is stomping and clapping, and the leaders are waving large sticks decorated with ribbons and skulls on the top. Behind the procession leaders there is a large throne-like chair. The chair looks like it's attached to long wooden poles and is being carried on the shoulders of around 6 or 8 people. Behind them the long procession tails off into the distance. I cannot see the face of the figure sitting on the chair, although I can just distinguish the outline of what seems to be a wide-brimmed hat, and sticking out from the top of the hat, something tall and thin. The chanting stops, and the drums take a different beat. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat. The chair is lowered to the ground, although the figure doesn't move. The procession of people form a circle around the chair and stand facing outwards, sticks raised in a threatening pose. The partygoers begin whooping and calling, and more dancing goes on. Still, the huge circle of people never moves from its position around the chair, and the rest of the revellers seem to be taking less interest now, only content to dance, sing, and pass round what looks like food or drinks. I look at Sidoni and raise my eyebrows in confusion. What on earth is that all about? I ask nervously. We have reached the home of the Quetzali tribe, and I'm afraid that was the beginning of the initiation ceremony for their new queen. We've got less time than I thought. Suddenly the penny drops. Initiation ceremony? New queen? Good grief! Tell me that wasn't my Gran in that chair. Sidoni nods her head ever so slightly. But we have to get her out of there. We can't leave her in there. I jumped to my feet, suddenly frantic with worry. Now I know what was sticking out of her hat. It was that stupid Quetzal bird feather that got her all into this trouble in the first place. Sidoni grabs my arm and drags me back into the bush. Don't be silly. If we go rushing in there now, Agent Moo will be in greater danger than ever. The villagers will never let her walk free if they believe her to be their new queen, and they will fight to the death anyone who tries to take her. Our only chance is to find the Nuevo Vida gang members and get them to tell us where the real queen of the Quetzali tribe is. There's no way we can rescue your Gran without her help. Suddenly I'm very afraid, and I feel like bursting into tears. But no, Sidoni is right. If my Gran has any chance of escaping, we have to do this properly. Sorry, I whisper, you're right. What's our plan? Good girl, says Sidoni gently. I know I can rely on you. We'll give them an hour or two to really get into the party mood, then we'll creep in quietly, see if we can casually join in with some of the revellers. Sidoni begins to unravel one of the long, colourful silks that she wears wrapped around her body. Here, take this, wrap it around yourself so you don't stand out too much. I take the long silk and wrap it around my body over my clothes, which I'll roll up as much as possible so they're almost entirely hidden under the fabric. I wrap the material around my waist, around my chest, and finish by draping the material loosely over my head and shoulders. Sidoni smiles at me. Perfect, she says. We wait quietly in our dinosaur plant, biding our time, waiting for the party to get into full swing. I can feel my heart beating wildly in my chest, and my legs feel like they've turned to jelly. I'm not sure if we waited a minute or an hour, but I jump slightly when Sidoni touches my arm and whispers, "It's time. Let's go." She creeps slowly out of the undergrowth, and I follow on behind her, holding her hand tightly. As we near the clearing, she begins to move and sway as if dancing in time to the music, and before I know what has happened, we've blended into a little group of partygoers, skipping and twirling around by the edge of the fire. We dance for a while and then wander towards a large tent-like structure where lots of people are gathered. We make our way into the tent, pushing through the crowds. In the centre of the tent, there are long bench-type seats and tables covered with all kinds of fruit, bowls of rice and platters of huge chicken legs and ribs. The tables are full on both sides. People are gathered, munching, laughing and talking. I see Sidoni carefully take in her surroundings, and then she guides me towards the end of the table. 2 spaces are available at the far end of one of the benches, and she motions for me to sit beside her. The next chapter is chapter 15, and it's called The Truth Hurts. See you soon.